I'm Jason Epperson. This is RV Miles, and it's time for the latest in national park news. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. It is time once again for a national park news roundup. I did not do one of these last month, so I've been filtering a lot of national park news into the weekly RV and camping news videos. But this month, we do have a full national park news roundup. And of course, there's some big news happening on the front of national parks. If you've heard that staffing issues in national parks due to federal cuts may be getting a reprieve due to a mass seasonal hiring, that is absolutely happening. But buckle up, because things could be getting much bumpier than we'd realized. We'll get into all of that in a moment, but first, if you're buying a new vehicle, a truck to tow with, perhaps you're going to want to check out the sponsor of today's video, eTrailer.com, and their new fitment guides for 2025 vehicles. eTrailer's expert guides help you answer questions like, will my old roof rack work with my new ride? Or how do I make sure I'm ready to tow right away? Transitioning to a new vehicle shouldn't mean starting over with your gear. That's why eTrailer is ready with 2025 fits for the products you know and trust. Their team of enthusiasts has done the work test fitting your favorite products on 2025 vehicles and creating detailed content to show exactly how it all works. With tailored solutions and real-world insights, they're here to make sure your next adventure starts smoothly. So whether you're already driving your 2025 vehicle or planning ahead, eTrailer is here with the gear advice and confidence you need to hit the road without hesitation. Visit the link in the description to head directly to eTrailer's Vehicle Finder to find custom fit accessories for your specific vehicle and more. Okay, a quick recap of where we are within the National Park Service workforce situation. Upon taking office, President Donald Trump ordered a 90-day hiring freeze for federal workers, and during that 90 days, departments were to look at staffing reorganization plans. That freeze caused 2,000 or so offers that were out to seasonal workers for this summer to be rescinded within the National Park Service. And then on January 28th, over 2 million federal employees received an email from the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, with the subject line, fork in the road. They were given the opportunity to resign with essentially 7 months severance. A number of National Park Service employees took that offer. I will have more information on that bit in a second, but shortly after that fork in the road offer expired, over 1,000 probationary employees within the National Park Service and 3,400 within the Forest Service were fired. Under the federal code, civil servants remain on probation for 1 year after they're hired, promoted, demoted, or are otherwise reassigned. Those that don't go through normal competitive hiring can be on probation for 2 years. So these are not necessarily new people in new positions. Many of them have been lifelong public servants who have just switched jobs. Now, while on probation, a federal employee can essentially be fired at will, where after probation, it's more of a complex process. After employees have completed their probation period, they gain rights to appeal to the Merit Systems Protection Board. The agency must then show that an employee wasn't doing the job or that the job was no longer necessary. So this was sort of the easy way of quickly culling the workforce, but it meant agencies like the National Park Service weren't given the option to choose who they fired based on need or performance. It also means these positions were not really cut, just the employees. These people were fired for cause. These were not layoffs due to positions being eliminated. It's a distinction that will become important in a moment. Now, in the days since, we've learned through reporting by the New York Times that somewhere over 700 National Park Service employees took that fork in the road offer. So between those 700 people and the 1,000 fired, about 9% of the National Park Service workforce has been cut. The National Park Service had 18,863 employees in 2023. That's the latest exact number I can find, and that's actually far below historic highs. There were over 22,000 National Park Service employees in 2011, meaning the National Park Service workforce was already down over 18% in the last 15 years. Part of that has to do with budgetary issues, and part of that has to do with the inability to fill many of the jobs available. And in that same 15-year period, park visitation is up over 15%, and the number of units in the park system increased by around 25, up to 433 National Park Service units, with additions under all three presidents. Now, in recent days, the Secretary of the Interior is the larger department that the National Park Service is under. The Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, has authorized up to 7,700 seasonal positions this year for the National Park Service, which is actually higher than the 3-year average of 6,350 workers that are usually hired seasonally. So he's done that to stave off any issues with visitation and operations this busy travel season. The Park Service is also hiring back at least 50 of the employees that were fired under the probational firings, according to the Associated Press. The plan to hire more seasonal workers will take some time. There's a reason that the Park Service begins this process in the previous year, and that process will be slower since several of the hiring managers are now gone. For instance, at Grand Teton National Park, most of the people were fired. It just happened to be the way it worked out. Were 16 of the 17 supervisors, leaving just one person to hire, train, and supervise the seasonal employees that are expected this summer. So it's going to be a bigger job for that one person to hire seasonal employees. But from a visitor's perspective, is this all really going to mean anything to us on the ground? Well, there have been some cuts to things like visitor center hours and tours already. The Washington Post reported that at the Grand Canyon, after 4 of the employees who worked the main entrance were fired, visitors waited 90 minutes just to enter the park that weekend after the firings. At Gettysburg National Military Park, where the layoffs cut most of the team that handled the rental of the historic farmhouses, renters were notified that their reservations had been canceled indefinitely. Florissant Fossil Beds National Monument in Colorado has decided to close its visitor center 2 days a week. Saguaro National Park in Arizona is closing its 2 visitor centers on Mondays. Effigy Mounds in Iowa said it's closing its visitor center 2 days a week until the summer hits. Online calendars for reservable tours in some parks show 0 availability, a casualty of losing the person that runs those. And Carlsbad Caverns National Park is down 14 out of 25 interpretive rangers, according to the Albuquerque Journal. People who lead tours of the caverns man the information desk and sell tickets. 11 of those folks were seasonal, though that was before the seasonal approval was announced. But we think of seasonal a lot as summer or maybe May through September. This right now is the heavy tourism season for Carlsbad. It peaks in March. So will things ease up once the hiring freeze ends and when seasonal workers are in place? Well, it's looking like these brute force cuts were just the very beginning. Just today, the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Personnel Management issued a memo to agency leaders with guidance on how to conduct reductions in the workforce. Remember, the 90-day hiring freeze, the first thing that happened was all about federal agencies pausing hiring while they submitted plans to reorganize and cull their workforce. So these other things that happened were sort of ancillary to that. The employee cuts to this point were sort of the easy cuts, and they weren't cuts to actual positions, just the people in those positions. Now it looks like the real work begins of laying off people whom the government considers unnecessary by removing their positions altogether. The agencies have been directed to conduct, quote, a significant reduction in the number of federal workers by eliminating positions that are not needed. The first phase includes submitting lists of any federal workers not deemed essential during the 2018 to 2019 government shutdown. That's about 4 in 10 federal workers. The deadline for submitting the plans is March 13th. The second phase requires a review of all employees' job descriptions, recent performance reports, length of service, and veteran status. The memo echoes Trump's February executive order that says that future hiring should be limited to 1 position for every 4 people who depart. So if they need to replace somebody who's gone, they need to wait until 4 people are gone in order to hire somebody else to fill a position. Exempted from this restructuring are positions in law enforcement, of which there are many in the National Park Service, but they're already short-staffed. Also exempted are border security, national security, public safety, and immigration enforcement workers, and various other workers like the U.S. Post Office. So I want to make this very clear that I'm just delivering the news here. I'm not expressing an opinion on this situation whatsoever. It's there for you to know about. You can agree with it. You can hate it. You can just take the information and travel and use it. I share all of this with you because it's going to be something that will be drawn out and will have many effects and changes over the courses of the coming months and perhaps years, and it will affect your travel plans and things that happen on the ground in national parks. Of course, that's the biggest story affecting national parks, but there is other national park news out there that we should get to. A federal judge tossed out a complaint filed against National Park Service over its policy not to accept cash from visitors entering certain parks, but stopped short of dismissing the entire lawsuit to give the plaintiffs an opportunity to refile an amended grievance. Last year, 3 people sued the Park Service over its cashless policy at a growing number of locations, including Death Valley National Park. The plaintiffs alleged that the policy violated federal code, stating that U.S. currency is legal tender for all public charges. The Park Service says that in many areas, especially remote parks, the cost of processing the cash was more than the amount of cash collected. The agency launched cashless policies at a number of parks and monuments in 2023. In 2022, Death Valley collected $22,000 in cash over the course of the whole year, which they say cost more than $40,000 to process. The park's nowhere near the closest bank, and armored trucks to take the cash into civilization were costly. The judge ruled that the suit failed to properly establish that the plaintiffs lacked access to non-cash payment methods. Therefore, the plaintiffs had no standing. The judge offered the plaintiffs the opportunity to file an amended complaint with a deadline of March 7th. The Alaska legislature passed a resolution earlier this month urging President Trump to revert North America's highest peak to the name Denali, rather than changing it back to Mount McKinley. Trump, on his first day in office, signed an executive order calling for the name to revert to Mount McKinley. The 19-0 vote in the Alaska State Senate came just over a week after the state house passed the measure 31-8. A prospector in 1896 dubbed the peak Mount McKinley for William McKinley, who was elected president that same year. Although there were challenges to the McKinley name at the time it was announced, maps had already been circulated with the mountain's name in place. The name was formally recognized by the U.S. government until it was changed in 2015 under the Obama administration to Denali, although over that time it still often appeared on Alaskan maps as Denali. The park has been named Denali National Park since 1980 and remains so. In March of 2024, a volunteer with the Big Bend National Park Botany Program and a park ranger noticed some very tiny plants sprinkled among the desert rocks in a remote area in the northern reaches of the park. Upon closer examination, they realized that the fuzzy foliage and the interesting flowers looked like nothing they had ever seen before. Utilizing photos of the plants they'd taken, they consulted databases, records, publications, and experts, and they even posted the photos online to help identify their discovery. Excitement began to grow as it soon became apparent that these tiny plants were not previously known to science. A genetic analysis revealed that this plant is not just a new species, but it's best classified as an entirely new genus within the daisy family. They named it Ovicula biradiata. Ovicula means tiny sheep in reference to the thick white wool that covers the leaves, and biradiata refers to the 2 conspicuous ray petals in each flower. Researchers working with the plant have also affectionately named it woolly or woolly devil. Now that the species has been identified and named, there's a tremendous amount we've yet to learn about it, said Big Bend National Park Superintendent Anjana O'Connor. I'm excited to discover whether there are other populations in the park, details of its life cycle, what are the pollinators, and due to the current drought, if it will be observed at all this spring. Big Bend National Park has exceptional biodiversity due to its large size, 801,000 acres, and wide range of habitat types. Other recent scientific discoveries at Big Bend include a fossil record of a new species of duck-billed dinosaur and the detection of a species of oak once considered extinct. Finally, on March 1st and 2nd, Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine will celebrate its 100th anniversary as a national park with a special ranger program, living history, and the debut of the new 100th anniversary museum exhibit, Fort McHenry, the early years. In the late 19th century, as the strategic value of the fort waned, its historical significance as the original home of the brave inspired the public to take action. On March 3rd, 1925, Congress designated Fort McHenry as a national park and perpetual memorial shrine to the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner. That's it for this month's National Park News Roundup. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Hit the like button if you got something out of this video. Subscribe if you want more like it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.